Ernest Hemingway is one of the most influential American writers of the 20th century, known for his terse, economical prose and his focus on courage, loss, and endurance. He helped change the way English-language fiction was written and read. His life, marked by war, travel, fame, and personal struggle, became deeply intertwined with his art, to the point that Hemingway is as much a cultural figure as it is a name on book covers. Early years, Oak Park, family, and formation. Ernest Miller Hemingway was born on July 21, 1899, in Oak Park, Illinois, a comfortable conservative suburb just west of Chicago. His father, Clarence Ed Hemingway, was a physician with a love of hunting, fishing, and the outdoors. His mother, Grace Hall Hemingway, was a former singer and music teacher with strong artistic ambitions and a strict moral code. The tension between these influences, outdoor masculine pursuits and refined artistic expression, shaped Hemingway's sense of self from an early age. And the Hemingways were middle-class, church-going, and deeply embedded in Oak Park's ethos, sometimes summed up as a place of broad lawns and narrow minds. Ernest grew up with several siblings in a household that prized achievement and propriety. His mother pushed music and culture. His father taught him to shoot, fish, and camp in northern Michigan, where the family owned a cottage. These summers in Michigan's woods and lakes would later provide the setting and emotional landscape for some of his finest early short stories, including the Nick Adams stories. In school, Hemingway was a good but not exceptional student. He played sports like boxing and football, wrote for the school newspaper, and showed early interest in writing. His adolescent personality combined bravado with sensitivity. He began to craft a persona that emphasized toughness and action, even as he quietly observed people and scenes with a reporter's eye. But second, War and Wounds, World War I and its aftermath. When the United States entered World War I in 1917, Hemingway, like many young men of his generation, felt drawn to the adventure and perceived nobility of war. Rejected by the U.S. Army due to poor eyesight, he volunteered with the Red Cross as an ambulance driver in Italy. In 1918, while delivering supplies near the front, he was severely wounded by mortar fire, sustaining shrapnel injuries to his legs. Despite his wounds, he reportedly helped carry another soldier to safety, an experience that became part of his personal legend. His time in Italy was brief but formative. He witnessed the suffering and chaos of modern warfare and fell in love with a nurse, Agnes von Karofsky, who later broke off their relationship. The combination of physical pain, disillusionment, and romantic heartbreak became emotional material he would revisit in his fiction, most clearly in A Farewell to Arms. Returning to the United States after the war, Hemingway struggled, like many veterans, to adjust to peacetime life. The war had shattered old certainties and exposed him to death and randomness on a scale impossible to forget. He worked briefly in journalism again, but he was increasingly determined to become a serious writer of fiction. The third, beginnings as a writer, journalism, Paris, and the Lost Generation. In 1920, Hemingway married Hadley Richardson, a young woman from St. Louis, and soon took a job as a foreign correspondent for the Toronto Star. In 1921, they moved to Paris, where he would find both his literary voice and a community of expatriate artists and writers. Paris, in the early 1920s, was a magnet for creative talent. Gertrude Stein, Ezra Pound, James Joyce, F. Scott Fitzgerald, and many others. And Hemingway, still in his early 20s, plunged into this world with intense ambition. As a correspondent, he covered political events, sports, and features across Europe and the Middle East. His journalism kept his prose sharp and observational, while his evenings in cafes and salons exposed him to modernist ideas about art and narrative. Gertrude Stein became an early mentor, encouraging him to cut sentimentalism and to write the way he talked, focusing on simple, declarative sentences and concrete details. Ezra Pound offered editorial advice and connections. At the same time, Hemingway was writing short stories, many of them drawing on his Michigan boyhood and war experiences. Collections like In Our Time revealed a new kind of American prose, lean, unsentimental, and suggestive rather than overtly explanatory. His narrative method, often later called the iceberg theory, relied on leaving much unsaid, allowing readers to feel the weight of what remained beneath the surface. His first major novel, The Sun Also Rises, 1926, grew out of his experiences among expatriate friends in Paris and Spain. It depicted a group of disillusioned Americans and Britons, the lost generation, drifting through post-war Europe, drinking, watching bullfights, and struggling with love and meaning. The novel's style, with its spare dialogue and understated emotion, and its themes of impotence and the literal and metaphorical, resilience and ritual, such as bullfighting, made a powerful impression. It cemented Hemingway's reputation as a leading voice of his generation. IV, Fame, Craft, and Experiment. The 1920s and 1930s. After The Sun Also Rises, Hemingway's career accelerated. He divorced Hadley and married Pauline Pfeiffer, a wealthy fashion writer, in 1927. His personal life was increasingly turbulent, marked by affairs, friendships, rivalries, and frequent travel. But his dedication to craft remained intense. A Farewell to Arms, 1929, based on his World War I experience, told the tragic love story of an American ambulance driver and an English nurse in Italy. The novel combined stark depictions of war's brutality with a deeply felt romantic narrative, culminating in an ending of devastating loss. It was both a commercial and critical success, and confirmed Hemingway's standing as one of America's major novelists. During the 1930s, Hemingway continued to experiment. Death in the Afternoon, 1932, explored Spanish bullfighting, revealing his fascination with ritualized violence, courage, and aesthetics. Green Hills of Africa, 1935, drew on his African safari, mixing travel narrative with reflections on hunting, art, and masculinity. His short stories, such as The Short Happy Life of Francis Macumber and The Snows of Kilimanjaro, further developed themes of fear, failure, and the search for grace under pressure. Hemingway's prose in these years grew even more controlled. He used limited vocabularies of sensation and emotion, focusing on what characters did and perceived rather than lengthy introspection. Critics and scholars have noted how this style sought to capture life as experienced, with words functioning as precise tools rather than decorative flourishes. V. War, again, Spain, journalism, and For Whom the Bell Tolls. The Spanish Civil War, 1936-1939, drew Hemingway back to the battlefield, this time as a journalist and sympathizer with the Republican cause against Franco's fascists. He traveled to Spain, reported on the conflict, and became involved with other writers and activists. The war sharpened his sense of political commitment and moral ambiguity. He saw the brutality on both sides, but believed fascism represented a grave threat to human freedom. For Whom the Bell Tolls, 1940, widely considered one of his greatest novels, grew from his Spanish experience. It tells the story of Robert Jordan, an American dynamiter fighting with Republican guerrillas, tasked with blowing up a bridge as part of an offensive. The book explores love, sacrifice, fear, and the interconnectedness of human lives. The title comes from John Donne's meditation that no man is an island. It combines Hemingway's hallmark sparse style with more overt political and philosophical reflection. World War II saw Hemingway again playing multiple roles: journalist, quasi-participant, celebrity. He reported from Europe, joined naval patrols in the Caribbean, and was present during the liberation of Paris. And these experiences added to his personal mythology, but also took a toll on his health and psyche. Sacrifice, later years, The Old Man and the Sea and Decline. After the war, Hemingway's life and work entered a more uneven phase. He settled for long periods in Cuba, where he wrote, fished, and became a familiar presence around Havana. His third marriage to journalist Martha Gellhorn ended. He married his fourth and final wife, Mary Welsh. The Old Man and the Sea, 1952, a short novel about an aging Cuban fisherman's epic struggle with a giant marlin, marked a late artistic triumph. The story, deceptively simple, resonated as a parable about endurance, dignity, and the inevitability of loss. Santiago's solitary battle and ultimate defeat. He lands the fish only to see sharks devour it, mirrors Hemingway's own struggles with age, reputation, and declining powers. The book won the Pulitzer Prize and contributed to Hemingway receiving the Nobel Prize in Literature in 1954. Yet behind the public honors, his health was deteriorating. Years of heavy drinking, physical injuries from accidents, including 2 plane crashes in Africa, and untreated mental health issues took their toll. He suffered from depression and paranoia, and his once fierce energy often gave way to anxiety and despair. Medical treatments at the time included electroconvulsive therapy, which may have worsened his cognitive difficulties. On July 2, 1961, in Ketchum, Idaho, Hemingway died by suicide with a shotgun. His death shocked the literary world and prompted reflections on the cost of his strenuous life ethos when turned inward. It highlighted for many the fragility that lay behind his cult of toughness. 7th, writing legacy, style, themes, and influence. Ernest Hemingway's legacy in American and world literature is immense. His stylistic innovations alone, short declarative sentences, minimalistic description, reliance on subtext, and omission, change the expectations of prose fiction. Writers in English and other languages studied and emulated his technique, seeing in it a new way to capture modern experience. His iceberg theory of writing, the idea that only a small part of the story's meaning is visible on the surface, while the bulk lies beneath, encouraged readers to participate actively in constructing meaning. This approach matched a 20th century sensibility, skeptical of grand explanations and comfortable with ambiguity. Thematically, Hemingway's work often centers on war and violence. From World War I and the Spanish Civil War to bullfights and hunting, he explored how people respond under extreme pressure. Masculinity and gender. For decades, his characters were seen as embodiments of a certain tough, stoic masculinity, though later critics have complicated this view, examining vulnerability, androgyny, and the roles of women in his fiction. Love and loss, his novels and stories frequently depict intense relationships shadowed by death or separation. Nature and sport, fishing, hunting, and the wilderness serve as backdrops and metaphors for struggle and grace. Critically, Hemingway's reputation has gone through cycles. Early critics, mostly male, often praised him for his man's man qualities and directness. Later scholars, drawing on feminist and other theoretical approaches, have re-examined his portrayals of women and gender roles, finding more complexity and ambivalence than previously acknowledged. His works, like The Sun Also Rises and A Farewell to Arms, once thought critically exhausted, continue to generate new interpretations. From his boyhood in Oak Park and summers in Michigan, through the battlefields of Italy and Spain, the cafes of Paris, the plains of Africa, and the seas off Cuba, Ernest Hemingway turned life into literature and literature into legend. His beginnings as a journalist taught him to value precision and economy. His early years as a writer in Paris forged a style that reflected a fractured post-war world. His later career and personal struggles underscored the costs of the strenuous life he championed. For American readers and writers, Hemingway remains a towering and contested figure, a symbol of modernist innovation, a representative of a particular vision of masculinity, and a reminder of the power and limits of art to shape and survive a human life. His legacy lives on in classrooms, libraries, and the many authors who still grapple with or push against the paths he helped blaze.